All right, it should let you guys see that it has been recorded. And so we are going to kick off our July 9th regular meeting of the Election Advisory Committee. And I'd like to go start with a roll call as I read out the names. If you are present, please say so. And we can also confirm those online. Thanks for bearing with me, everybody. I've just been feeling a little sick and we have some really tight deadlines. So I'm actually right above you in my office, just trying to make sure that nobody gets sick today. We're on a really big deadline for next week to finish all of our petitions. And I wanted to extend that to you all to not get you sick in the middle of summer. So just in case, I have a lot going on and I'm right upstairs, but wanted to keep everybody healthy. I'm going to kick through our list. It's not in alphabetical order, so it'll keep everybody on their toes. Cameo Flood.
Here.
Susan Mace.
Here.
Kathy Nygaard.
Here.
Christina Barsky, she let us know that she wouldn't be available today. If you guys haven't seen it, check out the email from her. She's got some big changes happening. Amber Schaefer. Travis Hoffman. D'Artagnan Captain. Jack Rinnick.
I'm here.
Hey, Jack, great to see you. Just so you know, as the alternate, you could sub in for either Christina or Amber on this discussion too, as a voting member. Todd Mowbray.
Here.
Marilyn Ryan. Rebecca Dawson.
Here.
And Commissioner Slotnick.
Oh, here.
All right, great. So with that, we do have enough people to qualify for a quorum, so we can call to order. And I'm going to pass over to Kathy, who can go through the next agenda items. Kathy, thank you so much. Congratulations on being our new chair. If you need anything, I know we're all really flexible and working great here.
So thank you. I'm not a parliamentarian, but I'll do my best. I've taken going to meetings as a participant or observer since I was in the third grade. Way before they said it before. Thank you, Bluebirds. Hey, you all got the agenda electronically. Are there any where I haven't approved these?
I'll move.
Second, all in favor, opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. You've got a copy of the minutes. And are there any additions or corrections?
Well, the minutes are video recordings. I'm gonna assume they're right.
Right, too.
It's re-recorded meeting.
Now that on it when they are.
That's true.
Yeah.
Is there a motion?
Moved.
Present. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. Public comment, anything that is on the agenda that needs to be before this?
This is Eric.
I don't know. And let's move on to old business. Which is definitely what we've been talking about for a year. Is there anyone who would like to speak to the bylaw change before making a motion about it?
I would.
Thank you.
I'm gonna vote against it. There's a couple of components to that decision. Number one is I think there, as I thought back over the 6 or so years I've been on this commission, I think there are some really legitimate reasons to have the two major political organizations an explicit seat at the table. That's for a number of reasons. Number one, it makes common sense. Number two, there's nothing quite so quite some light into dispel anxieties is to be part of the project and have us. I think that's very important. Secondly, with an explicit bylaw stating that the two central committees have a representative. The other method would merely be people would apply at large and the commissioners would pick. Commission can change over the years. I can remember when it was vastly different. Yeah. And this ensures that both political organizations will never feel left out. The other component is optics. I think it's important. I recognize that the election advisory committee is not as in the public eye as some of the other county institutions, but I think we should behave as though we are. And I think the transparency is very important, so that members of the public can see that their particular interests at least are represented. And they may well be with people at large. We don't know that, but this gives the visual confirmation that it is in fact so. So for those reasons, I intend to vote against the bylaw change. And that's.
This is Travis. I just want to agree with that too. I think there's something to be said. I mean, there's a difference between nonpartisan and bipartisan, I guess. There's a lot of organizations that claim to be nonpartisan, but they're obviously scientifically partisan. And I don't want this to be one of those entities that think this, the member of this committee for many years. And the one thing that I really like about it is that a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds have been part of this committee, but we've all been able to work together. And especially, I think, in today's political climate, I think that if we can show that we're able to work together in a bipartisan fashion, that's a good thing. I think it shows it can be done. It shows people that our elections, well, the races out there are heated and whatnot, and they're all vying for things. Like the elections themselves are like bipartisan, they're secure, they're supported publicly. If more than just Republican, Democratic, Central parties get everything organized, like we can all work together to make sure that everybody who wants to vote is able to vote, that there are secure elections, that all the parties work together to make this one party over the other. So I will also be voting against the bylaw change.
That's a question. Where did the thing come from? How did this rise up?
Me, the Republican representative. And so I brought this forward because we do only have the two major parties represented explicitly with a spot. And I know the other parties have not responded when they've been reached out to, and so why they don't have someone here. But Bradley does a very good job of including all of the party leadership in all of the communications of the minutes, and so they are up to date with what's happening. The reason I brought this forward is because it's supposed to be a nonpartisan entity, the elections office is, and so I thought that having two positions that are specifically partisan goes against being a nonpartisan entity. So at risk of eliminating myself, I put this forward. Yeah.
And the other thing is that, even though the other parties, like the Libertarians and the Greens might be invited, they're not specifically called out as a group that should be represented. So
it was in the interest of fairness across the board. And so I don't know if this is the right time to do this. I guess if this amendment does not pass, I would propose a different amendment that would specifically slate whether they fill the position or not. But for the other parties that appear on our ballot, which are the Green and the Libertarian, that they have a space reserved for them as well.
Just maybe Bradley, it might have even been, years before you would probably remember, did we not at one point under, Jeff Badenoch have that in the bylaws that the Libertarians and the Greens?
I don't remember if it was in the bylaws, but we had so many things from the
Libertarians.
but I think that they're not registered central.
Oh,
I don't know if they have a registered central committee, but that was my thought, is in the interest of everyone having equal representation. At large members, you don't have to declare what party you belong to, you apply to the board. I would assume that those who are going through the application process are going to ask the questions to make sure we have a wide representation in the room to help with our community outreach and community membership and involvement. And so I just thought it would be in the interest of nonpartisanship to remove all partisan positions.
thanks.
It's like inviting members specifically as one party or another. Like those specific spots weren't being filled. Like there wasn't necessarily someone from like, representing the party who was willing to be here as a representative of the party. So those spots were going empty.
I think that that's fluctuated through the years. There's been times where there's been more participation and times where it's hard to get a volunteer. And, you know, we all know what volunteer work is.
Just that there is a bit of the change that's about to come for the student. So I don't know, when it comes to voting, if we're gonna do it by law, or are you gonna do?
Oh, Cameo, I'll jump in there really quickly. We split them out. So
Okay.
right now I've got them separate, but last time we did successfully vote the change to the student position. We just are waiting to have this discussion and this vote, and then we'll present them as two separate changes, as like a slate of bylaw changes for the commission. That way they don't get individual, we want to change here, we want to change here, we want to change here. And they can say, we like this revision and we approve this revision. We like this revision and we're going to do a little tweak to this. And thank you for that input. Here's what we're looking at. But we've approved the student. So that is still included in here because I haven't yet had our meeting to update it. I just wanted to maximize their time and present both. So they'll be separate, but presented at the same time. Does that make sense? Great. Sorry, guys. Do you need that screen share up there for anything? It was just to reference that in this situation, if there's an active central committee, we could add them in. We've had communications with a non-active libertarian central committee, but that's exactly what you were referencing earlier, Rebecca. Sometimes these groups are very active, sometimes they're not. There was a position made, but it's about, is there an active central committee? And that's really what was prohibiting us with other qualified parties in getting representatives.
And I'm not, I mean, I don't love the idea of proposing we create new positions that are just going to sit empty and forever. But I'm just trying, as you said, with optics, it goes both ways. The optics of having partisan membership should include all of it, or in my opinion, it should include maintenance.
So the same thing when we ask questions in interviews when people want to apply, we don't ask any questions that would reveal anybody's partisan. Just, I like the idea of having presentation. I think you're totally right on. Which one of you guys said about optics? I can't remember. But when we interview people, it's really hard.
Right, but you do ask questions about their backgrounds, their experiences, but it may not lead to party or partisan affiliation, but at least that they're bringing a broad spectrum of backgrounds, ideologies, and experiences to the table.
It's hard to tell on the ideology, but we have people.
Yeah, thank you, that's a more succinct way of saying what I was trying to say.
Anybody else? I wish to comment. And so may I ask the chairmanship to the vice chairman
I'm not sure.
until we move on to the next item of the agenda.
Hold it for about 30 seconds.
And like I've been thinking since the last meeting, before the last meeting, before the last, anyway, I think that the Missoula County Elections Advisory Committee serves as a liaison between Missoula voters and the county election office. Its purpose is to promote voter participation and free, honest elections. The EAC shall consist of 9 residents, all registered to vote in Missoula County, who are appointed by the county commissioners. 1 member designated the student delegate is to have been enrolled in a public or proprietary post-secondary institution at the time of appointment. All others will be appointed without designation. Ideally, the EAC should reflect the rich diversity of the Missoula County in terms of gender, ethnicity, political preference, economic and educational level, urban, rural residency, and physical ability. Members, while committed to impartiality in their official capacity as committee members, are to be sensitive to the individual differences of opinion and cultural values of their fellow citizens. They will serve 3-year terms, staggered.
So it sounds like having the political parties designate a person is not the county commission appointing them.
The commissioners would make their appointment based on their brilliance.
So you would vote in favor of the.
Why can't you vote?
Why can't you vote?
You vote, you vote. Yeah.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
vote.
no, I can't.
Sure. It's not supposed to bring on rules, but all the other boards and the chairs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've always done that here as well.
Okay. Oh,
The only way.
This person's sort of like Sarah. It seems like you already kind of try to recruit people, right? Bradley?
Yeah, so as a vacancy will open up, what we'll look at doing is before a vacancy opens up, we will start to work with our team here, usually about November or December. It's usually December. We tend to be busy in November. And say, you know, Susan, your term is about to expire. Would you like to recontinue so that we can really plan? If we know that there's going to be a vacancy, thank you very much, but I'm not able to serve again. We will start working with the Board of County Commissioners and our outreach department to recruit. We also recruit through our social media and on our website. We have had periods of times with vacancies. We have also had periods of time where we have had every alternate filled and, for lack of a better way of putting it, a wait list. Jack, I think you were a person who had applied and been interviewed multiple times, correct? Or were you a one-run D'Artagnan? Okay. But what we're really looking at is we've had this variety. So we'll do a lot of outreach when there are upcoming vacancies. And in this circumstance, if we were to proceed forward and we had a vacancy come up, we would do outreach through our standard path with the boards and communities and the Board of County Commissioners internally and locally. And depending on when it is, I announce these during like National Voter Registration Day. If you want to learn more about elections and really be a part of this process, we have an advisory committee. I'll also talk about it during election judge training if we know that that vacancy is going to come forward in that period of time. So we do a lot of different methods to outreach, and some have been incredibly beneficial. And like everything else, sometimes we've had ebb and flows in our membership.
So is some of it geared towards recruiting diversity of people. You know, like maybe you're doing outreach to specific organizations, like Indian Health seems like you could get recruit.
Yeah, so there were some specific things. I think you got looped in. When we are doing outreach and requests, we're always trying to, with the commissioners, really help balance underserved communities, as well as balance people who may need additional resources to help get in. One of the big things is rural representatives. We had a big push to try and get some rural representatives on the board when we had so many people that were within the city limits. So there is a big push, but now this all comes, yeah, as I was like, Susan, you were squarely in that boat. As this comes forward, it's based off of the candidates that apply. We do work to recruit, we do work to get in, but just like when we have a position, a paid position internally open, we're going to see what those candidates are, present all of those candidates to the commission, and they'll make the best solution for that fit for the spot. Oop, I'm not able to hear that. Sorry, guys.
Well, I just feel like that effort combined with, you know, some of the spots not being filled because people don't come in from the parties. You're looking for a diversity of people intentionally. I think that's probably the best we can do and maybe even more effective than pursuing just the parties. You know, like party affiliation is only one potential diversity. You know, like Kathy said, different cultures and languages and all sorts of other things.
I have a quick question.
Call a question.
There was no vote on. I move that we adopt bylaw change as written in blue line.
I'll say question.
I just want to jump in here really quick because I know I'm upstairs. Jack, did you hear everything that Kathy said when she went through and read that? Because I caught most of it.
It's a little choppy on my end.
Would you
I
guys just
heard-
read this one more time so we could get it on the record of exactly that language? And then we'll also have that form from you, Kathy, just to make sure that we're all spot on the same language there.
My motion,
But that way we read it.
my motion is that the EAC shall consist of 9 residents, all registered to vote in Missoula County, who are appointed by the county commissioners. 1 member designated the student delegate is to have been enrolled in a public or proprietary post-secondary institution at the time of appointment. All others will be appointed without designation. Ideally, the EAC should reflect the rich diversity of Missoula County in terms of gender, ethnicity, political preference, economic and educational level, urban-rural residency, and physical ability. Members, while committed to impartiality in their official capacity as committee members, are to be sensitive to the individual differences of opinion and cultural values of their fellow citizens. They will serve 3-year terms, staggered so that 1/3 of the term expires each year. All are eligible for reappointment so long as they remain Missoula County voters in good standing.
Okay.
What is this a statement of, like a mission statement or a vision statement, or is this
That you're
officially, what is it?
that you're reading.
A motion that I
Her motion.
made up.
Okay.
So you would rather that language than what's here?
Here,
I don't care. I didn't have this in front of me.
Oh,
Oh,
I guess I think we're voting on the bylaws changes.
bylaw changes should and according to this.
is that what you had meant to be repeated, Bradley?
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to hear. And that was, you guys were hitting the exact same question I had. As we look at this, would this replace the section about membership? And forgive me, I've got a lot of screens open and I'm running a little slow. But would that be to replace this section of membership here? Because it mirrors this right here, but you could scratch enumerations and you could just fill that section in here. The one thing I did hear about that was about terms. The way I heard that read, Kathy, is that there would be no term limit if you were a resident.
No, it says 3-year staggered terms.
But you could
But I
serve,
You can have as many as you want.
And right now it's got to
As
be,
long as you,
you're limited to 3.
Why don't you keep getting away?
I think sure. Good idea.
I think it's a good idea too. I didn't. Sure.
So I,
Can I just ask, the language that you just read, did that address the ADA membership? And I'm just wondering if you're proposing to strike the specific ADA member qualification? Or if we wanted to leave that in there? That's not stricken bylaws revision, but the way language that you just read, then it specify the ADA.
I'm not a parliamentarian.
I'm gonna make a motion. Madam Chairman.
Did you?
It's more so inclusive.
Did,
Alternative.
did you answer Sarah's question?
No, I got interrupted. I'm sorry, Sarah.
Oh, I just was wondering from the language you read, were you proposing to strike the ADA specification? Because that's a specific member role, that's separate to its own self in the bylaws. And in the bylaws, it hasn't been stricken with the current edits, so I'm just wondering if you're proposing that. As well.
As I understand parliamentary procedure, which is rudimentary at best, if there is no substantive mention, it stands. So this would stand.
so I don't understand what the thing that you were reading was. Is that a change to the bylaws or a supplement or what?
But it was just to reflect the nonpartisanship of the committee. I'm tired of talking about this for a whole year without any resolution.
So if, yeah, question. So, if you're proposing new language than what's been proposed in here already, according to Article 11 of the bylaws, in writing before we can put that. We'll need to postpone a vote again for
So
proposing new language.
an alternative to that would be if you withdrew the motion with your verbiage, if you agreed with the edits as printed here, motion to accept the edits as presented, which would eliminate the partisan position.
I will
And
withdraw my
keeps-
motion
and keeps-
and keep this as written.
So it would be, so for that to happen, you would need to withdraw your motion and present a new motion to accept the edits as presented.
Okay. I withdraw my motion and propose that in the new motion to replace it, that would incorporate those
Edits as.
edits as printed.
Second.
We got there.
Question.
So,
Oh,
okay,
yes.
so now we need to vote. Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Nay.
Nay.
Jack?
Jack, you get to vote.
I hate to do this. I think I might abstain. It's, yeah, I'll be abstaining on this vote.
You were an aye. One, so 4, so it passes 4-2 with one abstention.
No, sorry, you're the sorry.
Oh, I saw the chair. Oh, I'm sorry.
So I get to the end of this discussion.
Okay, therefore the motion passed.
Thank you.
Good job.
It's a labor of love.
I And I thought it went back, I think, great.
My bad.
Okay. Only took almost a year to go out.
Well, now we have
I know, but we got to that point.
Your recommendation.
Right along. The next item is the charge, EAC roles and responsibilities, collectively identified priorities.
We have a vote about the student.
We did that last
We
week.
did that last time.
So I'm not sure about this agenda item. What is it supposed to be? Because we did talk about this last time.
At one point, we were going to be writing like a job description, maybe that's thing.
I think we talked.
Akin to like a handbook, so people would know what they were doing before they,
And I thought like Christina was doing that.
Yeah.
Wasn't she? Yeah.
yeah. And it seemed, because I had asked her about it once, and it seemed like she had gotten started on it, but maybe that's something we can ask her about to just pass it along whatever she has. If she has something, I don't know.
I added this one on here and kept it on here because I hadn't had any forward momentum. I'll follow back up with Dr. Barsky a little bit about this. Sorry, guys, because this was one that had some discussion during the last couple of meetings. Loved the idea. And boy, we just had this little election pop up in between our last meeting and here, so I haven't seen a lot. I have a ton of documents. I can follow up with Christina and include this. I really think this is helpful for brand new members like Jack, who's coming in and trying to figure out, hey, what exactly am I going to be doing and helping focus on? As I always try to help guide towards that objective of increasing turnout. And there's been a lot of different ways we can get there. There's been a lot of different things that we can do. And that's what I'm really kind of excited is I'm glad, I have to echo this. I'm so glad we made a vote on those bylaw changes. I'll be sending out some updates to make sure I track that all correctly before we present and invite you guys to come to a commissioners meeting. And then it's what do we do next? So like, what are the roles and responsibilities and how can we identify these priorities that we want to focus on as the EAC?
Bradley, you said you have a lot of documentation and in theory, Christina has probably got some sort of a draft put together as well. To move this forward, is that something, if they're digital, that you can share with the members and we can all go through and kind of come up with our own guideline and return them to you so we can come up with a collective? Does that make sense what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best way that this works for me, which hopefully still works for you all, is SharePoint links, like where I had the agenda. I can kind of come through because a lot of this, the nuts and bolts of the work of the EAC tends to break out to individual resolutions in the past. I tend to be I loved your parliamentary discussion because I'm not a great person at Robert's Rules of Orders. I tend to be a little more casual in general, but I can put these together as resolutions that came out. Items like we should hold public tours of the election space so that the public knows where to go with this new building. That's an example of something the EAC took on and made a resolution, passed forward to the commission. And in 2019, we presented that over to the commission, started holding public tours. Prepaid postage is an excellent example of a way to impact turnout. And I can kind of help put together other resolutions that have passed, see what Christina has established, and put that all together into a SharePoint link and really work on getting that going. Right now, that looks like August, beginning of August, if that was appropriate for you guys.
Bradley,
Yes, sir.
take just like a half step back. When you mentioned when this comes to the commissioners, somebody should be there to talk about it, and the media will definitely ask questions. As a person who brought it up, if you would want to speak to it, and if anybody can come, as somebody who's opposed to it, you should come to give voice, describe the discussion, because I can say, yeah, this is what I heard, but you guys are in the thick of it, and they will for sure ask. So if you are okay with that, or if you fit into your schedule,
I will do my absolute best.
I understand how that goes. So, and you guys can work together.
Right. As
Yeah.
long as I can work with my work stuff,
Absolutely.
I will do my absolute
Yeah, we
best.
can get it on an admin when it works for you and for you too.
Well, this
Yep,
group
between-
is about table, so I'm.
So-
Table the charge portion of that for another time.
So I think Bradley was gonna send out something, so I still.
Deal with it.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, if you could send out a living document for all of us to go through with the expectations and things that have passed in the past and come up with a document to provide to members.
I could do that for you guys.
Gonna say, I'm just, yeah, if we can kind of work on it and add to it outside of our meeting times, yeah, maybe we can actually like. Right.
That we would like to the collaborators, software type of stuff.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Charge is table. The election administrator update is the next item on the agenda.
Sorry, guys. I sent out a really brief election administrator update for you all. I'm really working hard to keep this easy, digestible, and be really to the point of the big items we hit. A pretty broad update of the work we had done through the primary election. We were on track with voter turnout numbers from historic elections. We ran a fantastic election here with the help of all of our team. We were able to process through and have a very successful polling place election. We did have, as always, we have areas we've learned, grown, and improved upon. And we did get a lot of great guidance and feedback from our polling place workers, as well as through some of our nonpartisan observers. For those of you, I know I talked with those of you in the polling places, you may have noticed we had observers from the Carter Center who came, and they had documentation and forms laid out to track very specific election items. We received a overall great report from the Carter Center that helped update, and it did provide us a couple very specific items to look into. My voter page for where you're registered, and reiterating that voters can only register to vote here at the election center. And as always, more signs. For those of you who just went through sign updates for our campus here, we did a lot of work to get our signs updated and try and make it pretty unified and standard. When you come to a brand new area, it could be blanketed with signs directing voters to the polling place so that they know where to go in target range school. We couldn't do it without the hard work of our community, and it went really well. Sorry, I stepped on somebody's toes.
Oh, you know, I was trying to say, speaking of signs, CS Porter really needs better signage. The one that was even there was just blown down and laying on the ground.
I think across the board, we got to hit more signage. One of the things we ran into is we had a great plan for signage. We loaded it on the truck, and I went to some polling places, and Target Range had the Emma Dickinson school signs. And we were doing a really great job of switching and helping calibrate. It becomes so hard on election day when things start to go out into the field. Signage across the board. And one of the things we hit internally was labeling those signs a little better. This map, this is sign one. Sign one goes here. All of these signs go to CS Porter. All of these signs go to the Lifelong Learning Center was one of the hardest because it's behind the building. It's similar to Cold Springs. You have to navigate to behind the building. We have not yet had a chance to do our internal debrief. That's scheduled for later this month because of our petitions coming through. But overall, we're always learning from our elections. We had a very great election going through, and we're going to make it even better for November. The next item was really about our NVRA update. This is our mailing. National Voter Registration Act is what NVRA, that's what NVRA stands for. This is a federally required mailing. We would normally mail this in January, but the Secretary of State's database wasn't fully implemented, and the time frame from when it was didn't leave us enough time to complete this process. To complete NVRA, what you do is you compare the list of voters on change of address information. And if a voter has a different address with the post office than what they have on file with us, they'll receive a postcard notification in the mail that says, please update your information. This is forwarding service. This would be sent to the address they have on file, but it will go to their new address. They can then use that to update their information. And if we do not receive a response in 30 days, or the first response is returned as undeliverable, they get a second notice. If that second notice doesn't get a response or is returned undeliverable, they are inactivated. But you cannot inactivate voters within 90 days of a federal election. Our mailing house has the first mailer to go out. And so that should be going out this weekend. So people should start seeing it on Monday. We'll do our second mailing in August, but we will not inactivate any of these voters. We'll only process the ones we've received back with updated addresses because of that 90-day window. So we won't be changing our voters from an active status to an inactive status between the elections. That will take place after we close the November election. And then we do next year's process in January as well. So this is our third update. We have done list maintenance by redistricting. This spring, every voter got a voter confirmation card in the mail. And if that was returned undeliverable, we reached out to try to update that. And if that was returned undeliverable, they were moved to an inactive status. So we've already done this process in a separate form once. By law, this must be completed this year. But we needed it to meet this time frame between these two elections. So we're going to run NVRA mailing 1 now, mailing 2 in the beginning of August. And then we will be in that 90-day window. So we won't be able to inactivate until after the election. And then we'll repeat a similar process next January. Every year we do this process. We should be good to hit it each January now that the database has received all of the updates it needs. Questions about NVRA?
So the ballots that get mailed to people that have moved and we don't know that they're inactive, those should come back to if they can't be delivered, right?
Yeah, so if your address isn't on file, ballots aren't forwardable. It will be returned to our office as undeliverable. So we're reaching out to people we know are going to have undeliverable ballots, and we're asking them to update their information. Then if they're an inactive voter, they're not automatically sent a ballot in the mail. And so those voters who don't respond to those multiple mailings move to an inactive status, and they can appear at the polls to reactivate and vote a regular ballot on election day, but they don't get a ballot automatically in the mail. Todd.
Yeah, I hate to make you talk more, but, so you run your entire address list through the National Change of Address database, and that's where you get corrections back?
Exactly. It's actually implemented into the database now. So
Okay.
there's a module inside our database that's connected directly with Melissa data. That's the name for National Change of Address data. It compares those two. It generated back the list, and we have 2,600 voters. Those 2,600 voters are getting a postcard. If they reply, they're removed from the list. But if they don't reply or it's undeliverable, they'll get a second.
Yeah.
And then after the election, we'll have to inactivate them. We would want to do this before the election date, but we've been running into deadlines and needs to improvements on the way the database works.
Hey.
Sorry, I was just trying to spit out all my words for you guys today. So that process, this is just a continuation from the January process. Unfortunately, when we had run the list, it kept the information from January, so it was delayed again. We worked with the state to get that information corrected, but now we can't hit 90 days a second time we will send both cards and inactivate afterwards. So it should update voters' information ahead of the election. But it won't move those voters who don't respond to inactive. Petition processing is my next item, and this is a huge one. I wanted to kind of start with a little bit of an update to how this works. For a statewide ballot issue, petitions are due to elections offices by June 18th. So as we were closing out the June primary election, the petition groups were coming up on the deadline to send in the petitions they'd been collecting. We've had groups out collecting petition signatures since March. And in that last week, we received 5,000 petition submittals. A submittal is a bundle of 25 pages of petition signatures. Each page has up to 10 lines on it. So we are provided with a 4-week timeline to review if each of those signatures are from registered voters within the county. Jill Bezdachek has done an amazing job of coordinating and managing this monumental task. Just like every other area, the database was running slow. We worked closely with the state and did a great improvement a week into our deadline to bring the database up to speed. We refer to it here, it was like getting a steak knife compared to our butter knife. It made the database function so much better. But we were 1 week out delayed in a 4-week timeline on processing these. We've hired additional staff, trained additional staff. Jill has been training in us, other new staff. Sarah has learned how to pre-process petitions, and we have a team next door. Yesterday alone, we were able to process 530 petition submittals. So we are catching back up to where we need to be, and they are all due by next Friday. So our petition processing plan has been in full speed. We receive them in and we process them in the order in which they were received. We just finished CI 126. CI 126 and 127 are the ones that change the primaries to open primaries and have the runoff elections. We have about 200 left to get through from 127. Then on the very last day, we received all of them from 128. We should be processing those by next week. And we're looking like we're on track due to Jill's monumental efforts. So petition processing has been a huge push across the state as the database was running slowly. There was a great concern that every large county would miss the deadline. The state really pulled through and increased the speed of the database, and Jill really pulled through and got together an amazing team to help get through these signatures. Our whole team has been cranking hard on this. Well, we just finished a huge election and we're all pretty pooped. So hats off to Jill and everybody for that work. We are working closely and things are rapidly changing with petitions at the state level as they have been all year long. So we're tracking that to see what that may mean. But that is our process of verifying the signatures to potentially place new items on the ballot for November. And that has been an all hands on deck process since June 18th. So we've really been cruising through on this. And I'm one of these areas where I'm really happy for collaboration with the state and improving that database. If we'd have gotten these petition signatures in April, we would have been able to improve this database much sooner. But what happened is these campaigns all dropped in the last week. And so every county went into the database and every county experienced these 4-minute delays on pre-processing, 30-minute delays every time you clicked a button. And the state was able to help us get the tools we need to get our job done. We're looking at that, and the mitigation areas have been taken by the state. The next area is maybe it's time to look at, is there a way to ask petitions to roll in? Not just ask, to require this. So that if you collect it, you have 4 weeks to turn in a submission. Instead of collecting submissions, holding them from March, and delivering hundreds of thousands of pages all in the same day. We're talking with the Association of Clerk and Recorders about that to see maybe we can fix this for the future through a legislative change. Questions about petitions? Yeah, Todd?
Yeah, have you asked anyone to carry such a bill?
So right now, it came up about 2 weeks ago. We are really exploring this. The way that I like to approach legislation changes when it's elections is through the Association of Clerk and Recorders.
Sure.
As we go through this, we like to find a supportive elections person that may not be from Missoula. You know, we always like it to be somebody in the majority. And as we go through, a great example is the chair of the SAVA committee carried our write-in bill through the association that required us to have a declaration of intent filed to count write-in votes. And by running it through and working closely with the legislature, it had almost unanimous support. I feel like if we are careful and cautious about how we look at this, this could be something we implement. There is a group that this will impact, and that is groups that do petition signature gathering. So we want to include them and have them be a part of this discussion. That group changes every year, so it's exceptionally hard to figure out who will be doing that. But we did have interest from the Secretary of State's office in potentially carrying that bill, and they've had very great legislative success. So this is a very bipartisan. We're really just exploring it now. I can almost guarantee you won't see it coming out of Missoula County Elections Office or Missoula County, but it just needs to be something that says, if you're going to have 500 people out collecting these signatures for 4 months, we need an appropriate time frame to process them. You collect for 4 weeks, give us 4 weeks to process. Something like that's what we're thinking, but it's very preliminary right now.
Bradley, have you met Jen Hensley?
Absolutely.
Yeah, she'd be a great person just to talk through this with. She's so
Yeah.
well connected across the state, and her business is knowing how to get new legislation over the finish line.
Just so everybody here with the EAC knows, Jen Hensley was the lobbyist for Missoula County during the last legislative session. Commissioner Slotnick, do you know if there's been any establishment for a lobbyist from Missoula County for the next session, and will it be Jen?
My understanding is she'll be back.
Great. She was excellent to work with. We spent some very odd hours on the phone talking about election bills. She's been really great representative. And we also partner in Jen exceptionally closely with the Association of Clerk and Recorders. That's my update on petitions. A mountain of work that we've been able to conquer. Hats off to our whole team. Fall planning is my final update. We are going through, and our biggest items we are working on right now have been improvements to items flagged from our recent updates. With our contingency planning, the things that came from Carter Center and the upcoming meeting we still have to have internally to help make sure that any areas or hiccups we've been able to accomplish. But my biggest item that I'm always working on is, if we want to increase voter turnout, the best way to do that is to get people registered to vote. Well, how do we get them registered to vote? Well, we let them know our deadlines and our resources that are available. So we're going to have a couple of big things coming forward. There are more groups that work in parallel than any other county I've seen registering voters. We want to educate. We want to provide nonpartisan voter registration that does not capture any of your personal information. But most importantly, we want to make sure that all of our groups and public know about these dates and deadlines. And so National Voter Registration Day will be an educational event. That will be mid-September. And then satellite voting offices, I think, are going to be one of our biggest items to hit. We'll have satellite voting offices in Evro, Seeley Lake, Frenchtown, and we've had a plan that I need to follow back up on to add it to Lolo as well. As well as the University of Montana. I don't know if that was the first one I said or not. We have these for individual reasons. In the past, some of our highest utilizers of same-day registration come from the campus. So bringing our services to the campus helps limit the line and wait times on campus. If you live in Condon and you're told that during the 29 days ahead of the election, you have to drive into town to register, that can be hard. So when we establish that, we'll reach out to voters, and essentially, if you register at the DMV or you register with us in a way that's not appropriate, we would say, Cameo, we've received your voter registration form. We've received your voter registration form. In the 29 days ahead of the election, you must appear in person at our office. These are our extended hours. This is our office location. And these are the hours of our satellite office events, if any of those would be easier for you to attend. That's one of our biggest things that we see. We've really been digging into this. And this year, one of the things we saw, number one, we used to think that the motor vehicle department lost voter registrations, but they still process them in the 29 days ahead of the election. And we're reaching out to those voters to say, we cannot accept this from the motor vehicle department. You need to come in person. Well, this is a great opportunity to say, here are our extended hours, and this is when our office will be at the Frenchtown Fire Station to make it easier for you. As we go through this, the big area is staffing. We want to hold all these satellite office events during that 29 days where you must appear in person. This is also the time where we need to staff our office very well. We need to staff these satellite office events, and the rural events and university events are ones that we plan. The CSKT at Grey Wolf, that has been combined with the polling location, and that is required under a specific section of law. So that one runs on Friday, Monday, and Tuesday. Sorry, Friday, Saturday, and Tuesday. They changed and adjusted those. The Monday hours were not very beneficial, but we'll be really hosting a lot of different registration opportunities. If you want to increase turnout, make sure your registration is correct. And bring registration to the communities where people need to register at. So that's a lot of our fall planning. In addition to our standard, we will be printing, proofing ballots, preparing ballots, and mailing ballots. Our mail date is October 11th. Questions about some of that outreach? This is a lot of what my goal to put together by August is. This date, this time, this location for a satellite office event. This date, time, and location for National Voter Registration Day. Yeah, Rebecca.
Bradley, I ask this every year, what is the law, the code number for the 3 days up at Grey Wolf? Because I'm asked every year why we spend more time up there.
It is a directive through the Secretary of State under the Wandering Medicine lawsuit.
Thank you.
I can see if I can pull that up very quickly because it's available on the website, but it is not a section of law. It is a lawsuit and a directive through the Secretary of State's office to hold these events.
Thank you. That should be enough for me to answer the questions I get every year.
Yep. And it is essentially that we plan these outreach events to mitigate lines and wait times on election day to make voting easier. And new starting in 2022, we follow the directive and the guidance under Wandering Medicine and partner with CSKT to provide satellite office services as they've required. The big update is the first time they did this was 2022. Through redistricting and some great thinking on the county's behalf, we got a modular building and placed it in the lot of Grey Wolf Peak. So it's not necessarily inside the casino, and we relocated the polling place there to maximize our staffing and efficiency. Every voter was able to be served at that location because we could register those voters as well. We could provide provisional ballots as well, and we could provide them for any district that they were in. I just lost you all. Are we coming back through yet?
They're frozen for me. Oh,
Yep.
they're back.
Looks like we just came back in here. Is everybody ready?
But
Great. Really paused it with that modular building and maximizing that staffing to do both the satellite office and the polling place. Any other questions about plans? Yeah.
So when the satellite offices are there, is it close enough to the actual election date that they can register and vote at the same time?
Yep. And that satellite office can serve in every capacity that we can do here at the election center.
Do you guys have to staff up specifically for that?
Yeah, that's something we're going to be looking at for this year. That's something we identified earlier, is we need to staff a specific person because your skill set to be able to manage the satellite office is very unique. As we had so many changes happening within our office in the weeks ahead of the election, our staff person who managed that office was Sarah Bell. And we really worked to maximize that because we had changes happening on the fly the weeks ahead of time. We have planned and we've dedicated to recruit, train, and staff somebody who can manage and oversee that office, which is a unique skill set amongst troubleshooting electronic equipment, customer service for voters, knowledge of election laws, and hired, trained, and serving through the elections office. So that's a big area. One of the great areas that we reach out to is we have a good partnership with CSKT. The best thing we can do is really work to see if we can gain people who mirror that community to help staff from that community.
The sway of 15.
Appreciate you, Commissioner Slotnick. Thank you.
Keep up the great work. It's a good discussion.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So that's the big crest of what we're looking at for our fall planning. We've got our same areas that we're looking at hitting. We want to expand that to also include additional information and outreach around National Voter Registration Day and satellite offices. Those being really unique areas that we can hit, cover with voters to make sure that they get the best service they can and they're more likely to vote on election day. Or the day they show up at that satellite office event if it's late registration. Questions?
Moving on to new business. Have a look into the discussion on bail balance.
Okay, so I worked at the poll on election day, and there's always people that come in and say they should have got an absentee ballot and they never got one. And then I started hearing it from people that really ought to know better. So I know there's your kind of people that don't really pay attention, but people that have been involved in politics and elections telling me that they never got their mail-in ballot really makes me worried. I think they would have been on the lookout for that and they wouldn't have just let it go in the trash somehow. So I got to thinking about whether there's any way we can identify whether the ballots the elections office is sending out is actually getting to voters. And I don't know, I guess I think it's a question we can't answer, and maybe we should be able to answer it. I just don't know how big of a deal it is. I know Bradley mentioned that in 2020, which was all mail in, the return rate was what, like 80%?
Almost 90, 89 point something. It was so 90% of the people who were sent a ballot voted it, not just received it, voted it. Now, this is that Cameo and I had a little discussion on this, and it was, yes, this is so hard to track. And how do we track this? How do we get this information? Is it an issue? And without tracking and getting the information, it's hard to know if it's an issue. And the anecdotal discussions, I mean, as Cameo says, when I hear about it and I look at a ballot that's to the right address, marked undeliverable and returned to our office, that's hard. But what I also don't get to see is how many ballots made it to voters and got voted. You know, when we have a 50% turnout and we're mailing 80,000 ballots, well, Is it because they're not receiving it? Is it because it's a primary election? Is it because they're not interested in voting in this election? But if we don't look in and get data, we don't know where it's coming from.
The other thing I was asking about was the elections office uses a third party to actually put the envelopes in the mail. So there's another, so there's another third party, then there's the post office who has to deliver it. Hopefully it gets to the right place and gets to the voter. And then, there's places in there where there could be a breakdown that we might not even know about, the town manager.
Bradley?
Mhm.
Would it be possible to have a form available at the polling places so that when someone does make a remark that they didn't get the ballot, they could put down their name and address and that could be double checked?
So if they're going to the poll with that issue, they're gonna have to do a provisional ballot, and there is a thing on the folder for the provisional ballot that says something, I think, that they can fill that in.
I have that idea as well, so thank you. But my other question is, can we put something on the website, some orange button that says, thought you should have received your ballot but didn't? Let us know, and people can just click on it and fill in their information, and that alerts the elections office of however many people are reporting the issue. And so that if we can see if there's a trend, is it a specific precinct? Is it a specific post office we're dealing with? Like, start narrowing down where the problem may be, if the problem does exist. And it doesn't seem like it would be that difficult to put that button on the website.
No, I feel like I don't want to speak out of turn because I want to confirm this information, but I do feel like we could create a form that you get into by clicking a button that puts in your voter information and then sends out a reply, which would basically be like emailing election info to say, I didn't receive my ballot, but gave it a little bit more access instead of, it was a little easier to click that button than it is to find the election info email under the contact us section and click that link. Put
Well,
it
and you may be able to generate a report off of that, which then you can look at different geographical factors and see if there's a trending problem.
Yep.
You think that part of that, just ballots being lost might be because some people, because of the all mail-in elections, just thought that they had switched to absentee ballots and that they're not getting them anymore and showing up at the polling place saying they should have gotten it? I mean, is there some way to pass along information with one of these other mailings that you have that alerts people to that? Like at the very least saying, if you're not sure if you're absentee voter, then check here where, call and ask.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think the information we send out says to check your voter registration status, go here, so that people will see if they're in person or mail-in or inactive.
And if they're absent, it'll show the process of it.
Yeah. So we do tell them where to check their voter registration, but I'm just saying, it sucks to find out after the fact, but if we can find some way to figure out if it is actually a problem. An easy way for people to report they're not receiving their ballots.
Yep.
We tried to look at mine recently and I couldn't.
Oh, well, that's
quite, and I
good
think
to
there's
know.
probably the state website, it was the. It used to have like all their past elections, things like that. It was just basically, yes, registered.
Oh, yeah, that's because there's a button that's really hard to see the color of it.
Oh, I guess it was there, but I
Yeah.
didn't see it.
The new one is not as intuitive as the old one.
So I guess, back to my question, I feel like I've heard it enough from people that should know better. That maybe there is a problem, but we don't have any way to figure out if there's a problem. Do we need to figure out if there's a problem, or do we just need to say there's always gonna be this? Which could be the case,
I think there is, because I think Susan's correct, that there are people who are so accustomed to mail ballots that they think they're gonna get a mail ballot every single time.
yeah, there is confusion about the local.
And we're saying something like this time with the redistricting, everybody was mixed up.
I also don't think they really know that if they change their address, it kicks them off the absentee list until they ask for it again.
That's true.
I had a little bit of a discussion with Jill, who is our lead, and she helps kind of direct traffic, handles, people answering phones. And I said, what are you seeing? And it's a multitude of different things. Inactive voters, bad address, and your postcard is coming, not registered absentee. That one was one of our biggest. Now, when we did this process, we mailed every polling place voter a mailer to inform them that they were not absentee. And we processed through about, I want to say about 500 of those total. So we're at that saturation point. Our absentee voters want to be our absentee voters. Our polling place voters want to be our polling place voters. I just ran some numbers. In the primary election, the number of provisional ballots that we accepted from voters who had an absentee ballot sent to them was 161. That's out of the 35,000 we counted, 2,000 of those are polling place ballots. That's a pretty small percentage. Now, that's people who came to the polling place, who wanted to vote in a primary election, who said, I did not get my absentee ballot, or it was destroyed, I lost it, whatever, who went to vote. That's a different area than what Cameo is talking about, which is, I didn't get my ballot, and maybe I didn't go to the polls to vote. Maybe I just skipped it. It's similar to being registered. Getting a ballot is a good way to vote. And if you don't get a ballot, you're not less likely to vote. So that's the info I can pull up very easily. 161 provisionals from the last election that we accepted because they had said, I didn't have an absentee, I didn't vote my absentee.
As formerly as one of those third parties, who at the time was the largest non-governmental mailer in the state, those figures are well within the capacity of the whole system. That's less than 0.2% of your mailed out ballots. If it's did you say 160?
Yeah, now also remember, those are people who came to the polling place.
Right.
So when Cameo talks about this, these higher engagement voters, these more knowledgeable voters,
yeah,
that's that other area, because what you'll never find without looking in some capacity is, what is it of people who aren't reporting, they just give up? Well, I didn't get my ballot, it's too late.
Roommate or spouse that gets a ballot, they don't even think, because one of the guys I heard from was like, well, my girlfriend got a ballot, but I never got one. He wouldn't, if he had been living alone, it may have not even occurred to him that there was an election that he was supposed to get a ballot.
Exactly. And who comes to that location? Because boy, those are pretty high engagement voters, and those are provisional ballots on election day. That doesn't include those who say, as we do a ton of outreach, did you get your provisional ballot? No, I didn't. And they come and pick it up before election day. Pick it up, get it replaced, et cetera, et cetera. So we're running into a lot of those aspects where getting that data, unless we come up with a program to track it, becomes really hard. And what we might find is, like Todd said, yeah, we got hundreds of % of voters that are experiencing this problem. Or we might find that it's more widespread than we had thought. The data we're able to pull is not the same as the data that Cameo was kind of discussing. Voters not getting a ballot. I can tell you how many ballots are returned undeliverable. That doesn't mean that they were registered correctly ahead of time. That also doesn't mean they didn't come and pick it up or get it replaced.
Well, the other thing is just the issue of postal service. I live on a rural postal route. And if the carrier doesn't feel like making the delivery, it's your name. And the post office won't do anything about it until it's 5 days in a row.
And I checked my mail yesterday and had
The neighbors.
probably 8 to 10 pieces of mail for the people across the street, so. Knows if you're not a good neighbor and you're not taking the mail across the street, then, but I do think rather, like you said, what Cammy was talking about and what you're able to pull right now are two different issues. And so brainstorming ways that people can report the issue at least gives us a way to kind of track it, kind of get an idea if it's a widespread problem. And I don't know what the best way to do that, to enable the public to do that is, but I do think that there should be some sort of reporting mechanism available if people are inclined to say, hey, I didn't get it. And so that we can maybe see if it is potential.
Well, then with this discussion, we can focus our work to try to help capture some more numbers. We have a very specific focus, and it's processing ballots and ensuring that ballots go through and get processed and that we're meeting that law. But I want to brainstorm with our team. Is there a way we can help gain more information about why ballots may be undeliverable? Cammy and I talked a bit about, I get a picture of items being delivered to my post office box each day. And the way we send these, my ballot shows up that it will be there that day. Well, what you were just talking about, Rebecca, my ballot would show up that it was delivered today, but I didn't get it because it's in my neighbor's mailbox, you know? And so like the post office may even report that as delivered. And we still run into a different issue. So I like bringing this up as an area for discussion on the EAC. If we're looking at increasing voter turnout as a goal of the EAC, getting voters ballots who ask to get their ballot in the mail is a good way to do that. How big of an issue is it? That's where I'm like, boy, the data I have is so anecdotal that I can't tell you. And this is an opportunity as the EAC to say, I mean, I love this. Let me pop right back to the mission statement. Conduct sound research and learn best practice with a goal of increasing public participation in the election process. Boy, this seems like one that may want some look from the EAC. How do we figure that out? I don't know, but I think this is a great area to start that discussion and say, maybe we can nail this down in a better way. Does that match what you were thinking, Cameo? Sorry to step on your toes,
Yeah.
Susan.
Yeah, I mostly just wanted to see if anybody thought it was a potential problem that we ought to know the answer to. But, you know, maybe the answer is that it's okay if 1% of the people never get their ballots. I don't know. If I was one of those, I'd probably be saying that's not okay.
Yeah, and yeah, if you're one of them.
Voter that would be coming in here going, I want my ballot.
It seems like there was a postcard earlier this year, but do we, like people who aren't registered as absentee, do we send them something that says, do you want to be an absentee? I mean, because if there's only like 2,000 people who are voting at the polls, it seems like most people are registered absentee, but.
So with the polling place voters, we send them a flag, a trifold, and it was, your polling place has been, it either has been relocated or this is your polling place with instructions at it. And on the back side of that trifold, it has the people want to seem to be absentee voters, they could fill out that form in the back. So that was what Brad had mentioned earlier, and probably about 900 of those come back to us, so Jill's team did the input of those and they have those updated, but yeah, so there is that option there to change their status to absentee.
And I bet we'll do that this election too, because a primary election is not the same as a general election. a federal presidential general election, there will be more voters who vote at the polls and by mail in November. And the big reason we wanted to do that mailer was redistricting. And when we go through 2 years, your last 5 elections are by mail. So the primary election is kind of the one where people are like, where's my ballot? Because we've had schools, municipals, another school, and then, nope, you go to Lowell School today. And we just want to communicate that information that, yeah, you just got a ballot for the school election, but you're going to be voting at the polls and your polling place is here. Yeah, sorry, I think I cut you off, Candy.
Do you guys get phone numbers with the voter registrations?
That's not
Engineered. Do you get a lot of phone numbers though? Do people fill that in? I know there's a place for it. And I guess what I was wondering is like after the November election, if maybe we could do a sample and call the people that didn't vote and just ask them if they remember receiving their absentee ballot.
Might be a good tracking method. That's a good idea.
Well, I mean, maybe we could get some volunteers. Maybe the parties.
Yeah.
That they very central committee project,
Put it in fact.
so.
Mhm.
I mean, it doesn't have to be a huge sample. If you could do, a couple hundred or something, you might get a pretty good idea. If they're 8% of them say, oh yeah, I just didn't vote, then you might have,
I like that idea. I'm thinking of a lot of different concerns that I have. When we collect data, I like it to be data we can stand behind, not anecdotal data. That being said, we've also self-selected people for surveys. We just need to be clear about how people are selected, how they get included in, and that like there is no standard deviation, no like your sample size is not large enough to create an overall, but what we can say is we wanted to know the answer to a question, so at least we asked. Is it something we can say that with certainty 51% of Missoula feels this way or did or didn't get it? No, but we can say that we talked to 200 voters and 50 of them said, I never got a ballot and that's why I didn't vote. And the other 150 said, I missed it. That sort of thing. Or hopefully 5 of them said, I never got a ballot and that's why I didn't vote. So as we think about that, I really like these ideas because I think that this kind of transitions in towards that earlier discussion of like identifying those priorities of what we want to look at. If it's increasing voter turnout, and one of these ways is looking at, did you get your ballot? That really hits this mission statement and goal to me. And this is something that we can help set you guys up for. And we can knock one out of the park with the EAC. Hitting that mission statement goal, working to help set you up for success, and working to do some project that you'll notice that I've become very cautious. I cannot promise to get you all of this together next week. I can get it in August. Like something that we can work with too to help set everyone up for success. Did that make sense? I'm feeling loopy today, guys. So
Committee members about anything.
Did we want to talk about the outreach?
Oh. We can talk about outreach.
But I mean, like one time that Josh was here, they talked about going to different organizations and all that, yeah.
So I had set up doing one of those up in Condon. And then canceled it because anyway, they couldn't manage that time. So anyway, I had gotten a PowerPoint from Bradley. And so Rebecca and I presented it to the Pachyderm meeting list, and that's just a group of Republicans. And it was pretty interesting. We didn't use the PowerPoint, we just went through the process. And the way those normally work, you end up talking for 15 minutes, and then people can't stop themselves, they have to start asking questions. So I thought it was pretty good. We went over, how the voter registration gets done, and then how the ballot processing works. And by then it fell apart and turned into a lot of questions about how the voter registration ensures that the people that are registered are actually citizens. So then we talked about how you have to get, prove your citizenship to get your state ID or a driver's license. But there was a lot of questions we couldn't answer, and now that there's some legislation coming up, I think we should all be prepared for that to raise its head during the election season. It's accusations of non-citizen voting and.
Which that's something, it's not, like you said, it's not a scientific sample size, but it was the biggest question is how are we making sure that non-citizens are not voting, and I don't know, needed DMV
Well,
process.
I guess I was left at a disadvantage because I don't know the answer about how that gets checked. I think we're relying on the motor vehicles to determine if somebody is, and what if you don't register through motor vehicles, so you send your registration, now it's left up to your honesty and whether you read it, understood it, and paid attention when you check that box that said you were a citizen and understand the ramifications of not doing that. So I'm not saying that I'm not saying anything other than I think that's something that the answer needs to be ready before we get too much farther in the election season, because it's going to start coming up.
Yeah. Been talked about quite a bit.
That one's tough because these
It
are
sounds
rules.
to me, it seems to me that it's something the state Secretary of State's office should be addressing.
Yep, this is a statewide regulation and rule, and that's exactly it. I know they did a couple of updates, and I'll see if I can follow up and find information on it. Cameo, this is a tough one. You do not need to be a citizen to get a driver's license. You also do not necessarily need to be a citizen for Social Security. You can be a resident alien.
I
All
think we
of it.
all know that. That's kind of a problem,
So
Yeah.
I
All
think
of it's
the answers
self-affirming.
I think the answers we're looking for, Bradley, is what checks and balances are in place to ensure that non-citizens are not registering to vote, other than relying on their honesty on the form. And that's probably something that we need from the Secretary of State's office, but I think that's the information we need to be ready to disseminate to people who ask the question.
Yep. And this comes out of like news articles.
Well, and it would be in just our general outreach, even before people ask.
I really think it's gonna be a big deal this year. And if there's no answer, it's gonna be even a bigger deal. So if the answer is medium good, it's probably good enough.
Right.
If it's all like, because they said they weren't citizens, so they're not voting, it's like.
Yeah,
Well, and where we saw this recently was Glasgow, Malta, mayor race. 2 non-citizens voted in the election. They were challenged by another person. And so the challenge is our ultimate way. That the way Montana's laws are established are requiring participation. And it was a challenge from somebody else saying that I do not feel that this is a legally registered person. I don't feel that they're a citizen. They were challenged. They received that challenge and they said, well, I guess we're not a citizen. They had checked the box on their form. And that's the process in the state of Montana. Anything else would need to be a new law.
Seems like.
I know. Doesn't that make you just like so excited for January's legislative
Say, are
session?
you a citizen? What would you say? You'd be completely and utterly offended. It probably could be.
Well,
Yeah.
and the counteract is what documentation would you need to provide every registered voter in the state of Montana to show your citizenship?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people register through the motor vehicles and they do get the documentation. I just don't know whether they keep good track of this person's a citizen and this person isn't. Or if they even do, I don't know if they do that. I don't think. So
Anyone who has a job has to fill out an I-9. So. And I'm only saying this because I feel like anyone who's had a job has been asked if they're a citizen or not, so I don't really feel like it's, an offensive question.
When it comes to voting, it's, I just, I don't know, I just, because of the court case and stuff, I think it's gonna be really, really hard.
If you wanna know, if you want to, you gotta be able to answer the question yourself.
Madam Chair, I have a question for anybody. Is there available a list, like you guys are connected to the Backyard Club? Is there a list of organizations that we could use to, like, if I had a list of organizations that have meetings, I would send out, I don't know, 4 or 5 inquiries, say, would you like this? Would you like a presentation? But I don't know where to even start, other than the Young Democrats or something.
When Josh brought it up,
Yeah,
what they were looking at was like the community councils in the various neighborhoods and.
from the neighborhood council.
Yeah,
You might check with the chamber, they might have a list of different.
and I feel like we need to like ease into this because the questions you get, you don't wanna go in there and say.
So that's very true.
Yeah, we know all about the elections and then you can't answer half the question.
If we were at a friendly meeting, some of them, it was, whoa. So, yeah, I think reviewing the PowerPoints, reviewing all the information, calling Bradley or the Secretary of State or whoever, get your questions answered really, really clearly
Yeah,
so that you can answer the question, because, yeah, even in a friendly group, it got a little aggressive at times.
Yeah, those are very, oh, go ahead, sorry.
It
what
was.
you saying, Bradley?
These are exceptionally challenging meetings, and I understand where Commissioner Slotnick was coming from. Sometimes I'm not the greatest messenger. Overly polished, knowledgeable about some other areas that can be rough. Also, our community councils are the highest level of engagement that we have. These are not people who going and presenting information on this, they're like, yeah, maybe we can increase turnout by presenting this information. They're already there, man. They're volunteering to be on a community council.
Yeah, I was thinking
This is-
more like a Rotary or,
And so I was digging, I have a list,
you have a list?
and it comes from you all. And it comes from election judge recruitment. And so I've got it. I sent it out in January on election judge recruitment. I'm digging through to find it now, and I'll send it back out to say, these are the organizations that we have. A lot of these organizations are service organizations, which can be helpful. But I always want to get the information to people who don't have it. If we want to increase turnout, we don't need to be hitting our highest engaged people. I look at people who serve on the community council very similar to the engagement level of you all. Volunteers providing time who are engaged. And where can they share it to? How can we get it more wide?
I'm not so concerned about turnout. I think that's pretty, I mean, if that's a corollary benefit, that's great, but my objective is calming people's worries.
So, and I think
Like-
that's what Josh was getting at, is dispelling the myths and
Yeah.
rumors and, get people started on, there's probably an answer to this.
Clearly speak to the integrity within the process here, but the question about citizenship, that's a good one. No, but I don't know how you'd answer that in this state.
Can you go through hoops and you do a hula?
Was the even submit a voter's registration, vote for voter registration to the office if they indicated that they're not a citizen on their driver's application?
That was the question, is how much due diligence is the DMV doing? If somebody fills it out when they go to get their ID or their driver's license, are they just getting pushed through no matter what? Or is the person at that office going, okay, you're eligible for this ID, but nope, that's Brown can't, Brown just, we don't know the answer there. So I think we need to do some follow-up at the Secretary of State's office, at our local DMVs, and just do our own research and share what we find so that we can give more informed answers. But honestly, a lot of it's gonna come down to personal integrity. And that was what we came up with, and people weren't overly satisfied with that answer.
I think we've all seen that too, television commercials.
I have some really good contacts at the DMV and I can help get that process going. I have really strong ideas of what they will say. I want to hear it from them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You know, there's the one thing about what the rules say they're supposed to do, and it's another thing what they're actually doing. Because they could be saying, it's not my problem, the elections office will figure this out.
Yeah.
You know?
And we're saying we trust what they're doing,
Here we go.
so that may be a breakdown that we're unaware of.
I think there would be some serious ramifications if somebody was actually doing
And I would disagree with you if somebody knew it.
Well, it's not our job to sit here and speculate whether they're doing their job right or not. Like, that's for their organization, their supervisor. If we want to go, if you want to know personally, go to that organization and inquire about it. Like, as an EAC, I don't think that's our place. Like, we advise the county commissioners on elections.
So what I'm saying is I want the elections office to be aware that this question is gonna come. And I'm just saying they're probably need to see the answer. And I didn't plan on the EAC doing anything about it, but I'm sure the elections office is gonna get hit if they find the answer. It's not-
Well, I mean, it's not legal for non-citizens to vote. I believe it's legal in Montana.
Of course it is.
Some states or some cities allow that in the those elections.
But in the context of doing community outreach to calm the fears and to answer the general citizens' questions, we need to know what the answer is.
It's like we have to. It's a self-reported. It's self-reported whether people are citizens or not. You can't ask.
And then, yeah, I mean, it's.
Just be prepared if you do it.
Just, and I think the elections office needs to be prepared when it comes up, because it's gonna come up.
Yeah. Sorry, Bradley.
All right.
Yep.
Anything else? Well, this is the thing.
Right, what's, who's the contact for SOS? Can't think what his name was, the years.
One of my main contacts is Stuart Fuller.
Yeah.
Yep.
Fuller.
WELL here.
Yep.
What are you gonna call?
It's full of.
Ideally, one of the best ways to reach out, what I'd like to do with this is basically put together an email and forward it to everybody on the EAC. That way I can kind of help get those answers really well specified. I can get in touch with, Rebecca knows a gal that I can contact at the DMV to confirm their process, and Stuart can confirm SOS process, and we can provide that out. I want to hear what they say.
Yeah.
And if that's okay, I'd like to take this as a charge from Cameo to say, please help us know what processes the DMV goes through to verify citizenship of voters. I definitely know the process elections office do. And I'm pretty sure the DMV does nothing. They send it to the elections office. But I want to hear that verbatim from the state and DMV.
What about OPA then, I guess?
The Office of Public Assistance too. I think they forward those through and don't verify any citizenship on the voter registration. I don't know if there's other requirements that may be needed for that, but I don't think anywhere does it link a requirement for like OPI or driver's license to voter registration. I think we just get the data on the form. Now, This is a good question to have clearly answered. So when you get asked this, it can be very clear. I get asked this every time I present. How do you verify citizenship? It's self-affirming, and you have the ability to challenge any other voter. And what would be the way that we would verify that citizenship? What document would you want to provide to show that you are a citizen? Because that's kind of the hard aspect, is like, does a birth certificate mean you're a citizen?
Well, if you have your birth certificate, but your real ID.
Yeah, because that's what I was thinking. I saw Susan looking at her ID. I have a real ID. I gave him pieces of mail, everything I could.
Your real ID has an
Yeah.
stamp
Yeah.
on it.
The star.
It says it's a real ID, so that means you're a citizen.
So
I
it,
can't remember, I need to show citizen.
Yeah. Yep. That's what that is.
Yep.
That star.
Yeah.
So let me please help get that information together and get that out. I bet I can get that by the end of the month, no problem. Right now, Secretary of State's been a little bit delayed, but I'm gonna both reach out to the state and get in touch with DMV. And if I heard Travis correctly, I'll add OPI to my list too.
OBA.
Assistance, thank you. Yep. Guys, I swear, I'm glad that I made it to this meeting. I am running on empty. Thank you all. Thanks for bearing with me as I'm misnaming everything.
I'll move to adjourn.
Second?
There's no opposition. It was unanimous.
Thank you, probably get that there.
Thank you all. I'll kick out some emails here and we'll send out minutes as quick as we can. We've been really trying to kick those out ASAP. Hey, we voted on another bylaw issue. I will be reaching out to everybody and offering up some times. I want to make sure we can get Rebecca there. I want to make sure we can get as many people as we can. So Todd, I'm looking at you. A lot of this will be helping fill in the conversation that happened around this for the public commissioners meeting. So we'll do a little prep work. We'll plan a good time. I'm looking out just a little bit of time. I will be out of town until the beginning of August.
Enjoy.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
You're talking about nothing.